This episode of the Smart Poker Study podcast is brought to you by my upcoming webinar, Rejamming Like a Boss, and it's actually going to be held tomorrow, Saturday, the 17th at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So rejamming is a 3-bet shove over a pre-flop raiser within MTTs or sit-and-goes, and I will show you how the pros use this move to accumulate those much-needed chips when they need it the most. And bonus, everyone who signs up gets a Rejam podcast, a training video, and of course, the live webinar. If you can't make it to the live webinar, you'll also get a recording so you can watch it again and again, or, watch the recording for the first time. So it's a 3-part Rejam mini course. Visit www.smartpokerstudy.com/rejamming webinar to purchase today. Don't miss out. Hello, I'm Sky Matsuhashi, founder of SmartPokerStudy.com, the place for poker players who are always striving to be better today than they were yesterday. Poker people, in episode 94, I concluded MED number 1 by discussing solid pre-flop 3-bet ranges in order to exploit your opponents and to lessen their exploitation of you. Hey, poker people, TGIF, I tell ya. It's time for another Q&A. Yep, doing my part to help you with exactly what you need and boost your skills. Thanks for sharing, thanks for subscribing in your favorite podcast app, thanks also for subscribing in YouTube and for liking those videos below, and thanks for the Patreon support. I couldn't do this without ya. Today I'm featuring 3 questions from some gnarly poker peeps. These questions all came in response to an email I sent out wanting to know what people were having issues with. The question I put forth was, what poker skill or area do you know you need help on right now to improve your game and results? I seriously got a ton of responses, and the 3 responses I'll use today are representative of the most popular topics that people asked about. So visit today's show notes at www.smartpokerstudy.com/pod95 for links to everything I discussed today and to join the weekly boost for exclusive poker strategy delivered directly to that inbox.
And now for our feature presentation.
Okay, so the first response to my emailed question, it comes from Al, and let's see, Al says, the areas I need help include 1. Poker math. I purchased the book by Doug Hull and am working on the assignments. I'm working hard to understand which plays may be profitable, how to use my position with opening bets, when to consider raising, when is best to fold, etc. Lots to learn, obviously. And number 2, I'm also working on getting more aggressive and a little looser, changing things up as my usual play is too predictable and tight. I also am working on not getting attached to big pocket pairs post-flop when the board texture suggests I may be behind. I think these things just require practice and breaking old patterns. Well, thanks for that response, Al. I really appreciate it. And with these 2 issues, you've really got your work cut out for you, let me tell you. The first one, math. So regarding the math in poker, practice totally makes perfect. And lots of people don't want to hear that regarding math. They want simple shortcuts and simple answers and stuff, but it's really the truth that practice makes perfect. You've got to practice working out the break-even math for every single bet, every call, and every raise you make as you review hands. The more practice, the better. So as a quick example in just one hand, or taking a look at just one hand, let's say you open on the button pre-flop. How often does your open sizing need to work to break even? Now, let's say the big blind called you, so you're in position on the flop, but he decided on whatever the flop was, he decided to donk lead for 3/4 pot. How often does your call need to have the best hand to break even? How often do you need to bluff catch or just have the best hand? Then on the next street, the turn, you have to call maybe a 2/3 pot bet. What's the break even there? And if you're on the turn and you have a draw, how many outs do you have? And what are the odds of hitting? So, remember, you use the 4-2 rule for this. And if you're contemplating a river bluff on the next street, how does your 2/3 pot river bluff have to work? Or how often does it have to work? As you can see, you can practice break-even math on every single street of every hand you play. Even if a bet isn't made, on the flop it could have been checked around, but how often would your half pot bet have to work? And how often is your opponent folding to that half pot bet based on his range and the board and everything. So drilling yourself like this with all the math over and over again, it really will improve your math game. And all you need is the correct formulas and constant practice. So check out this post if you haven't seen it yet. It's my break-even math post. You can find it at www.smartpokerstudy.com/poker-math-break-even. I know all those dashes are annoying and stuff, but if you want, just go to the show notes page and you'll click the link right there underneath this first question or first response to the email. So Al, in response to, you had talked about more aggression, you want to up your aggression, become a looser player. So, with your desire to get more aggressive, I totally agree with that. I was the taggiest person ever. I'm still pretty tagged, but I have worked a lot on increasing my looseness and my aggression, of course. So by learning how to play more aggressively, you'll learn plays and skills that they really will win you more pots than just waiting for the best hand and winning the pot with the best hand. And as a bonus, lots of opponents that you deal with nowadays, they're very aggressive themselves, as I'm sure you know. So becoming an aggressive player will give you insights into how they think, which in turn will lead you to ways of exploiting their lag or loose aggressive tendencies. I think the first thing to do in order to start upping that aggression is finding spots to 3-bet and then to ISO raise pre-flop. And this comes from creating 3-bet ranges and understanding which kinds of opponents you want to get involved with. Target loose passive players and isolate those guys in position. You can also isolate the nits who maybe do a lot of folding post-flop as well. You can also isolate the lags when you're in position if you know that they're flop or turn honest. You want to go for those guys too. And to increase aggression, the second thing you need to do is to start firing on the flop and the turn more often. Lots of players, they already know that C-bets are often bluffs, so they call the flop pretty readily. But they really, especially those tags and nitty opponents, they'll fold a lot to those double barrels because they've been conditioned that, like I said, C-bets are weak, those are bluffs, but those barrels, if somebody's willing to put in 2 streets or 2 bets, those are often the strong hands. So force yourself to get more aggressive in post-flop play and barrel off when their range isn't really helped much by the board. Also, I've got to recommend a great Red Chip Poker podcast about how and why to play more aggressively. You can go to redchippoker.com/how-to-play-looser-style- forget all that. Just go to the show notes page and click on the Red Chip Poker link there for that podcast. It's probably exactly what you need, Al, to learn to increase your aggression if you haven't already heard that podcast. And you also said, you don't want to get married to pocket pairs or, to those good pocket pairs post-flop. So you need to constantly reinforce the idea that no hand deserves to win. 6-5 suited can beat pocket aces about 22% of the time. So tell yourself this before each session you play and work on not eyeing the prize or not counting your chickens before they hatch. When you're dealt a lovely pocket pairs, I don't know how many times I've been dealt pocket queens and I thought to myself, yes, I'm going to take this pot down, and then I end up getting beat by a jack 10. That kind of stuff happens all the time. So don't count those chickens before they hatch. What I want you to do is push yourself to play one street at a time and to make good decisions one at a time. You've seen it 100 times when you have that pocket pair. You're just calling down because you hope it's the best, but all indications, because this guy's maybe, for example, a tight player. He only bets when he's got it, and he's firing 3 streets. Your pocket queens are dead on that 10 high flop. You shouldn't be calling. So if all signs point to a fold, you've got to train yourself to do it. So please, Al, ditch those pocket pairs like you had said within your response. When all signs indicate that you're beat, ditch them. Okay, response number 2 comes to us today from Taaryn. We've heard from Taaryn before, and I like how dedicated he seems to improving his game. Good on you, mate. So here goes. I am quite sure that I really need to analyze my games, and I would like to do it as effectively as possible. Therefore, some tips are vital. Alrighty, thanks, Taaryn. And for people who haven't really analyzed their game before, there are 3 things I want to recommend to you and to everyone else just to begin analyzing your game. So the first thing is using Poker Tracker 4 and tagging those trouble spots. So as you're playing, online poker, and you could do this for live, of course, you got to record the hands and everything, but you should be making note or tagging the hands where you had a difficult choice. I didn't know whether to fold or to raise. I didn't know whether to call or to fold, whatever it is. And it doesn't have to be hands where you won or you lost a lot of money, but you should be tagging hands where you just didn't know what the right play was. 3-betting and calling, all, they both seem positive EV. I don't know what to do. So if you use Poker Tracker 4 or a similar program, you should create a tag called trouble spots or something along those lines. As you play, you need to mark hands with this tag and review them the next day. Some things that might help you figure out, or some things to think about in these difficult spots, are like, what's the hand range your opponent has? How likely does he have a strong hand in relation to the board? Maybe his bet sizings are confusing you, or maybe he took some strange lines, like he check called, and then donk led the river. Whatever the case is, you just need to ask yourself, what is this opponent thinking as you're going through these trouble spots, And the second thing I'd like for you to recommend is, of course, Flopzilla, baby. Get Flopzilla. Go to www.flopzilla.com. Download it. Pay the $30-$35, whatever it is. It is the best poker software, besides Poker Tracker 4, that you'll ever use, I guarantee. And once you get Flopzilla, practice with it at least 30 minutes per day. And I really can't stress it enough. Actually, because I can't stress it enough, this probably should have been the number one suggestion. But I guess you've got to have hands saved in order to study on Flopzilla. So I guess Poker Tracker 4 is step 1, and then step 2 is getting Flopzilla. I guess it makes sense still. So use Flopzilla to break down the hands that you tag in step 1, all those trouble spots. You're looking to get a feel for ranges and hand versus range equities, as well as how the hands and ranges hit the flops. There's a great Flopzilla video that Split Suit put out, and I'm pretty sure I recommended it before. And I embedded the video in the show notes for today. Or if you want to just go to YouTube, you can search Split Suit Flopzilla, and it'll be the first video to pop up. So this is actually where I learned to use Flopzilla. Watch the video, see how he uses it, then copy what he does with your own hands. And the third recommendation for you is using game tape. Now, I know this will be complicated for lots of people to do who've never recorded their game. They don't know how to use these different software programs. They don't even have a mic and a headset, But there are just a few steps and lots of good resources to help you. Listen to podcast number 11 for more details about recording your game tape and the kind of things you want to do. And that's www.smartpokerstudy.com/pod11. And I recommend getting a free software called Open Broadcaster Software, or OBS, and you can get that from obsproject.com. Get the studio version, not the classic version. When you go to that page, and I have a link in the show notes, of course, but when you go to that page, on the left-hand side, you'll see studio choices. On the right, classic, go studio for the system you want, whether it's a Mac or PC, whatever the case is. And in the show notes, I also have embedded a very good video that shows you how to set up OBS for recording your sessions. And get yourself a good headset with a mic if you don't already have one. A lot of people already do because they do Skype and that kind of thing. So once everything is all set up, start by recording just 30 minutes of your session, then review it the next day. You should be speaking through each decision you make. You want all of your decisions to have a logical and valid reason behind them. Watching the game tape the next day, it will allow you to spot instances where your focus wanders, or you start clicking buttons without thinking, or where maybe you tilted and now you can dissect the reason for the tilt. You can rewatch the hand that just played. Oh my gosh, I got sucked out with my pocket aces versus 6-5 suited. Oh no, and that's what sent you on tilt the very next hand, So these three things are great for analyzing your game. There are so many more beyond these, but this is a great start. Alrighty, thanks, Taaryn. And speaking of great starts, this Saturday the 17th starts something awesome. My first monthly webinar. It's called Rejamming Like a Boss, and the final day to register is today. Rejamming is 3-bet shoving over an open razor with the intent of picking up the razor's chips, the blinds, and, of course, those antes, because this is MTTs. And this webinar is going to be perfect for all of you MTT and sit-and-go grinders out there. You guys are you might be really tired of hanging on for dear life at the bubble with like a 10 big blind stack. And I know that I used to be that way. It used to be a big problem for me. But the pros know how to use 3-bet jams earlier within the tournament to start building their stack, accumulating some chips to have a nice healthy stack to make a deep run. So by doing this, instead of hanging on to every single chip during the bubble, the pros and then you ultimately will use your stack and aggression to accumulate more chips for a deep run. The pros use the skill very effectively, and so now you will too. Visit www.smartpokerstudy.com/rejammingwebinar to learn more and to sign up today. And as a bonus, when you sign up, I'll send you the podcast called Breaking Down the Rejam and the training video called Rejamming Hand Review Using Flopzilla. You also get a link to the webinar recording, so even if you can't show up on Saturday, you'll still be able to learn the skills that your fellow podcast listeners will be employing over the weekend. The podcast training video and webinar, they all combine to make a 3-part rejamming mini course. It'll teach you everything you need to know to employ this killer strategy. So once again, visit www.smartpokerstudy.com/rejammingwebinar to learn more and to sign up today. And if you actually can't make it to the Saturday webinar, no biggie. You'll get a recording. Watch it in the future. Cool beans, party people. The final response today comes to us from Brian, and he simply said to my question, hey, what do you need help with right now? He said, hand reading. All right, well, thanks for that response, Brian. And I actually got this same response from quite a few different people. And so I understand all of you, Brian included, of course, but I understand you wanting to improve your hand reading skills. It's a super important skill, and it really is one that's not learned easily. Kind of like poker math, what I said before, practice, practice, practice is what you've got to do. And I am still constantly working on it, both off and on the tables. Every single hand that I review, every single hand that I respond to in forums or in the Facebook group, that kind of stuff, I'm constantly doing hand reading the entire time, whipping out that Flopzilla for every single hand I think about and then narrowing the range as I go. So what you want to do, Brian, and everyone else, make sure you are assigning a pre-flop range to the opponent first, then you're narrowing that range based on actions and bet sizings on each street. Like I just said, I recommend whipping out that Flopzilla for all of your hand reading practice. And you've probably heard me discuss a lot of hand reading already within the podcast and the videos and stuff. And actually, I did a whole series of hand reading podcasts starting with episode 62. So if you haven't heard those, go back and check it out. But listening to that podcast series, it's really just a start. It's going to take tons of work to improve this skill, and there really ain't no shortcut. So you should also actively work on hand reading within every session that you play, either live or online. Don't keep your hand reading practice to just the off the table work. If you play online, I recommend a focus session maybe every 2 or 3 days where you concentrate on actively hand reading on one table only. Of course, if you're playing live, you're only on one table anyway, so it's no big deal. But if you're like a multi-tabler online grinder, if you play 6 to 10 to 12 tables, cut down, do a focus session with just one table for 30 minutes every 2 or 3 days where you're only concentrated on hand reading from start to finish each hand that you play, each hand that goes on at the table. So I know that you'll find hand reading easier and you'll become more accurate over time. And I actually have some additional resources for hand reading strategies. Like I said, podcast episode 62 is where I started my own hand reading podcast series. You can also get the Hand Reading Lab by SplitSuit, going to splitsuit.com/HRL. Use that offer code SMART for some extra free videos. Of course, SplitSuit has an awesome poker workbook called Hand Reading for Live Players. You can get that on Amazon, and there's a link in the show notes. And my podcast about Andrew Brokos' style of hand reading, you can go to it was Q&A episode 41 where I talked about Andrew Brokos' his style of hand reading was to classify your opponent's range and the possible hands that they have, break it down into monsters, marginal hands, and draws or air. So that was that one right there, episode 41. And if you're actually a Tournament Poker Edge member, you can find Andrew's premier series on hand reading within the Tournament Poker Edge archive or video archive. And that's where I first learned about his style. So if you're a TPE member, take a look for that. Alrighty, thanks again, Brian. And thank you everyone so much for listening today. And of course, thanks again to Al, Taaryn, and Brian for responding to my email earlier. I hope my answers today boost yours and everyone else's poker skills. If you're not already there, head over to the show notes page for everything I discussed today at smartpokerstudy.com/pod95. And of course, I love feedback and questions, so if you want a question featured on the show or you got something to say, send it on through, via email to sky@smartpokerstudy.com. You can tweet me at smartpokerstudy or put it up in the Facebook group at www.smartpokerstudy.com/discuss. And I've got a big shout out for Taaryn. Taaryn recently purchased PT4, or Poker Tracker 4, through my affiliate link, and I promptly sent out my Smart HUD as a thank you for the support. I hope you put it to good use, Taaryn. Oh, and within the email, you also ask for more focus sessions or focus session training videos, and I will be doing more of those. So thank you very much for that request, because I think that's a grand idea. Alrighty, poker people, I'll be back on Tuesday for another strategy episode. It's time for MED number 2, Stealing and the Math Associated. I'm going to talk aggression, position, opponent types, and the math involved, of course, and I'll also be getting into cash game steals and MTT steals. Be there or be square, baby. And y'all know that word of mouth is the best advertising, so please keep spreading the word. Help me grow, poker people. Send them to the show notes page to get them started on all that this podcast has to offer. And don't forget, it's your last chance. www.smartpokerstudy.com/rejamming webinar. Last chance to sign up. It's the final day, and I don't want you to miss out. Until next time, study smart, play much, and make your next session the best one yet.